Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Katie Stolman. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I'll be your host for today's online event. We'd like to begin today's event by saying a thanks to our sponsor, Tamr, and let you know Tamr blends automation and data science expertise to speed and simplify data preparation for analytics so businesses can ask big questions and get business insights faster. Thanks again, Tamr. Today's webcast, How Data Science and Spend Analytics Found 100 Million Plus in Savings, is being presented by Matt Holtzapfel, Product Marketing at Tamr. Before I turn the program over to Matt, I just want to encourage everyone to open the group chat widget where you can interact with each other and submit questions for Matt. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you have problems during the event, please post a note in the chat and one of our staff will help. For choppy audio or stalled visuals, try refreshing your browser window. And at this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Matt for his presentation. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Katie. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. As Katie mentioned, we're going to be talking today about how data science was used to help a company save over $100 million using their data. The way that we think about our offering is really around turning data into dollars. And so today we're going to drill into one specific example of how that happens. One question that I often hear from customers is, how do I get more value out of the existing data that I have? It's very often that they have a set of data that they're looking at every day, whether that's spend reports, whether that's reports about customers and pipelines, that they're looking at every single day in order to understand what actions they should take. But there's so much other data that's being collected within the enterprise that also is incredibly valuable, but it needs the right context in order to create that value. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about and exactly what we do. As an analogy of how to think about enterprise data preparation, it's similar to the situation now for a lot of companies is similar to walking into a movie halfway through the movie. You might understand a little bit about the characters and you might enjoy some of the action and see how the story unfolds, but you never really get that full picture. And so you miss a lot of the context, you miss a lot of the story, and that movie just doesn't have the same impact on you. It's very similar with data, where if you just have a limited set of the data, whether it's just the data in your function, in your organization, and you don't have that full picture, you don't have that full story, it's extremely tough to get the full value of that data. And so just some examples of that situation within procurement, which is going to be the focus of this talk. One example is the number of spreadsheets that are just float around in an organization around pricing. So for example, before buying a new part or a new product, companies will get quotes from a lot of different suppliers. And all of that information is often just sitting in spreadsheets. But that information contains a lot of valuable data about what best prices are or what they should be negotiating around. And so by bringing that to the table and by preparing that data with existing spend data, there's value right there. Another example is all of that external data, all of that data about how commodity prices are changing, about suppliers that are either looking to grow revenue while decreasing margins, or are launching new product lines. All of this is valuable information for teams to know, but it needs the right context about how that company is engaging with that supplier. And so that's another example, bringing that data together, uncovering more value, and turning that information into hard dollars. Just a couple of more kind of examples of that. There's information at the suppliers or information at partners or customers that could be in spreadsheets, could be in emails. And all of that information, again, very valuable, uncovers a lot more hidden value and hidden opportunity. And then finally, what about that information that is just sitting in another business unit or sitting in another system? So whether it's we have multiple ERP systems, and if we bring that data together, we could find overlaps in our spend or overlaps in the activities that we're doing. These are all of the types of activities that enterprise data preparation looks to help and looks to enrich. And by bringing this information together, this area of light, which is the data that people are looking at today and getting opportunities, becomes much larger, because now you're looking at all of your data, and now you're finding new opportunities that you didn't know existed. And that's the core of what we're seeing at really cutting edge companies, is that they're taking this data, they're bringing it together, and they're finding new opportunities. So just to take a step back from that before we dig back into how that process unfolded from start to finish, and how customers are able to bring these data sources together and get the kind of dollars that I was just showing. I'll give a little overview about the company Tamr. So Tamr is an enterprise data preparation platform, and what that means is we are working with very large enterprises as well as smaller enterprises that just have very large data problems, and we're helping them bring all of this information together and find brand new ways of getting value out of their information and run much better analytics that are helping them move their businesses forward through better decision making. The company was founded in 2013 by enterprise database software veterans who've been wrestling with this problem for many years, and they recognized and saw an opportunity given other advancements in technology and in the ways that machines and computers can now use data, and how they can now run analyses much faster and at much greater scale. They found an opportunity to go and solve this problem, which is, how do I take these different data sources, bring them together, and turn that information into something valuable? And so the company was founded about 3 years ago, but as I showed in the previous slide, although we're a young company, we're already solving some very, very big problems for a lot of different customers. Some of our founders include Andy Palmer, who was one of the founders of Vertica, Michael Stonebreaker, who is a professor at MIT and won the Turing Award, as well as Jerry Held. Now let's transition to think a little bit about where we're at in the life of big data, where we've come and where we're going. 3 to 5 years ago, when big data was at the peak of its hype cycle, and you couldn't almost walk down the street without seeing something on a magazine or a newspaper talking about big data and the big opportunity, and how the future was all about data. The problem then was that there weren't very many data scientists, and there weren't very many good tools available to help companies take advantage of all that data. And so, going back to those earlier slides, people had those mounds and mounds of data that they thought had value, but just no real way of being able to access that information. Fast forward to today, we're in a much different story, in a much different place. The situation now is, show me the money. I have this data. I want some dollars from this data. I want to be able to take this data and get an ROI, because we've been hearing so much about big data. People have been evangelizing for years about it. Those days are over. Let's see some business results. And 38% of people are saying, we're not really sure if we're going to be able to get ROI out of all of these investments and out of all of this activity we did around big data. And the framework that we use when we're working with customers who have these problems, who have all of this data, and they want to get to ROI is a very simple one. It's, are you trying to grow revenue or are you trying to reduce costs? Because getting to ROI is all about doing one of the two. I've made this big investment. I've made this big expenditure in trying to improve how my data is managed, accessed, and analyzed. Now I want some money back for that. So the question is, do I go after revenue or do I go after spend? And what we're seeing for a lot of companies, going after spend, decreasing spend, is a fantastic way to get immediate ROI before going on to other areas of the business and look at areas such as growing revenue. Decreasing spend is an extremely complex and challenging problem, which we'll get into, but it's also a problem where once you do it, that money is going straight to the bottom line. And that money can be used to make further investments, whether that's in data or in other areas of the business as technologies change, as needs change. And so for companies out there that have these assets around big data, we really urge them to think about where is that ROI and take a look at, are there opportunities in my spend? And one reason we see this as being such a big opportunity for enterprises is because survey results show that CIOs value their relationship with procurement not very highly. Everyone values the relationship with the CEO, with the CFO, the COO. Once you go down the list, the Chief Procurement Officer barely makes the cut. The Chief Procurement Officer is just not on the radar of nearly enough CIOs. And what that means is there's a ton of opportunity for CIOs to partner with Chief Procurement Officers and people within procurement to look for ways to better leverage data to find opportunities. Because again, all of these savings and all of these opportunities that this joint group of the Chief Information Officer and the Chief Procurement Officer, all of those opportunities go straight to the bottom line. And so when we saw this information, we saw this as a huge opportunity for a lot of CIOs who are thinking, look, I've made these investments and I have more investments that I want to make. How do I get some money out of that? And so that's the real opportunity, and that's where we've seen a lot of success. And if we go from just saying, okay, there's the Chief Procurement Officer and they want to reduce costs, how do they do that? Well, for a Chief Procurement Officer, the basic questions are, what am I buying? How much am I paying for that? Why am I buying it? Who am I buying it from? And where is it being bought? So who's the buyer? Is it an individual? Is it a manufacturing site? All of this is important information, and in a lot of cases, it's sitting in a lot of different systems. And so as a Chief Procurement Officer, your primary goal is to ensure that you've picked the right suppliers and negotiated effectively with those suppliers to drive down your costs. And so if you are the Chief Procurement Officer of a manufacturing company, for example, you want to make sure that all of the parts going into that product are at the most effective cost and that they're going to meet the customer's requirements for what they expect out of that product. If you're the Chief Procurement Officer for a technology company, for example, you're not buying stuff that goes into a product necessarily, but you're buying things like travel. You're responsible for setting the travel policy and ensuring that employees within the organization are able to get to where they need to be productive, and that they're able to do it in a way that's cost effective. You're also looking at things like, how do I effectively purchase consulting services or technology services? All of this different information, all of this different spend, all rolls up to the Chief Procurement Officer, but a lot of this information is just scattered around, and it's difficult to get in one place. And so if I'm a Chief Procurement Officer and I'm trying to optimize my travel spend while also trying to figure out ways to reduce product costs, I have to go to multiple systems, talk to very different groups of people, and it's very unlikely that I'm going to have all that information in one area to have the full context of, are these things related or are they not? And so the chief procurement officer is one of the people who struggles with this overwhelming amount of data more than anyone. And I haven't even started talking about market intelligence, information about how commodity markets are changing, information about how suppliers' financials might be changing. Are suppliers profitable? Are they growing? Are they at risk? These are all the types of things that chief procurement officers have to wrestle with and have to use just a ton of data in order to make these decisions. And so being able to bring this information together solves a significant number of problems and finds just brand new opportunities for companies. Because again, as a procurement team, you're going to be spending a lot of your time on the things that are right in front of you, the suppliers who you meet with every day, the suppliers who you're having frequent negotiations with. But there's this huge long tail of data, this huge long tail of suppliers that requires automation and a effective approach to managing all this information in order for you to really move forward. And so the case study that's really the catalyst for this webinar is around working with a large diversified manufacturer who came to us with exactly the problems that I outlined, which were I have just a ton of information about product costs, about suppliers, about market information, about how my suppliers are being affected by changes in the market. How do I get all of this information under one roof? Oh, and I forgot to mention, all this information is scattered throughout a large global business in multiple ERP systems, in multiple business units. We need to bring that together. Let's go figure that out. What we were able to do is we were able to use Tamr to bring the information from dozens of ERP systems into one central area, so then over 1,500 procurement professionals could access that information in a Google search style mobile app, so that as a buyer in, let's say, Jacksonville, you know exactly what your global spend is with every single supplier. And so if I'm going to have a negotiation with HP, with Dell, with McMaster Carr, I know going into that negotiation how my colleagues have been managing that relationship, how much spend they have, what their payment terms have been. So I'm going into that with the full story. And so going back to the movie analogy I made at the very beginning, we're able to give them that full context of, here are all the characters in the movie, here's what the story is, and now they're able to go and finish it and execute using that vast amount of information, which you're able to turn into dollars, into hard savings when you have that type of context available at your fingertips. And so the specific tools that we gave to them enabled them to not only solve this problem of understanding globally how spend was being allocated and where there might be opportunities to better negotiate on terms and conditions and unit costs, but by having this unified, clean set of data, they're now able to run analytics in a fraction of the time. And so a few other examples of areas where companies that we work with are looking in order to drive significant cost savings are areas like inventory rationalization. So how do I take these thousands of SKUs that I'm carrying in inventory, and how do I ensure that that's optimized? How do I look across my global information resources and find out where there are opportunities to reduce my inventory carrying costs? And so by cutting out the data preparation aspect of the equation and by automating that using Tamr, customers are able to quickly get to the answer they need, which is, where is the opportunity to reduce inventory carrying costs? Where are we carrying unnecessary inventory? Another example of that is M&A integration. And so when there's a merger or an acquisition, there will be significant amounts of new data brought into the system, which can take weeks, months, or even years to integrate. And by using Tamr and automating the process of pulling together all of the data sources from one business unit into all of the data sources from another business unit, now this company is able to reduce unit costs to the tune of 5% or more every time they make an acquisition. Because one of the biggest values of an acquisition is being able to use your greater size in order to drive down costs. The problem with that is if you spend all of your time doing the data preparation and you don't have an automated solution to doing that, that's going to take a lot of time and that's going to cost a lot of money. And finally, contract compliance, that's another area where by using an enterprise data preparation tool such as Tamr, you're able to find areas where buyers or suppliers are not being compliant with contracts and where there are opportunities to drive down costs by looking across the globe and across every information source to identify opportunities to increase that compliance. And so in all of these cases, no matter what opportunities procurement teams are going after, there's a significant amount of work required in order to pull together this information, clean it up, do things like remove supplier duplicates or remove duplicate parts, or put that in the same format. That all requires significant manual work unless you're using a tool like Tamr that is able to automate all of that, get to business results very quickly, and help procurement teams identify those opportunities. And so now we are going to shift to a quick demo that shows how the product is actually used to drive savings. And a couple of examples that we're going to walk through of how Tamr is used to drive savings and turn data into dollars is supplier rationalization and commodity price monitoring. And what that means is, on the supplier rationalization front, the question for a lot of organizations is, do we have the optimal mix of suppliers? And so if, for example, you're purchasing ball bearings, you might find that we would get much better pricing if instead of having 10 suppliers, we only had 4 suppliers, and we were able to give all 4 of those suppliers a lot of volume and have them reduce their prices because they're getting more volume, they're treating us like a strategic partner. That's an area requires information about suppliers globally, and by bringing that into one roof and into one system, you're able to see where there are opportunities. Secondly, looking at commodity prices. So this is that external information about commodity prices. And so, for example, if you're purchasing something like transformers, which contain a lot of copper, you want to know when the price of copper drops, so then you can renegotiate that pricing. But the problem is, it's very hard to see what the impact of those commodity price changes are because they're changing every day and there are so many different commodities. By using Tamr, you're able to bring that information together and very quickly identify those opportunities. And we're going to walk through those 2 examples and show how you can get millions of dollars of savings by using Tamr. So I'm going to quickly do a screen share to pull up the demo. Great. Looks like the demo is now up. And I'm going to start with the output of what comes out of Tamr and how you would walk through this analysis, and then dive into how Tamr is able to actually do this and solve these problems. So for the problem of, am I carrying the right number of suppliers for each product, you might start with an analysis that says, okay, let's look at how many failures we have, so how many quality defects we have within each category, and what the on-time delivery is. And so what this essentially means is if something has a low failure rate, which means products are being shipped to customers and they're not failing, it also has an on-time delivery, which means suppliers are delivering these products on time, and that means that the commodity is very mature, and that switching suppliers is not potentially risky, and you have the opportunity to reduce suppliers. And so by looking at this one analytic, you're able to quickly see, okay, this bottom right corner, these are all of the areas where my categories are mature, suppliers are performing very well, and if I reduce the number of suppliers, I could potentially save money. There are other areas of the chart where it might be too early to reduce the number of suppliers because quality is maybe not as good as you want it to be, or delivery performance is not as good. But we're just going to look at where are there real big opportunities. And one of those is capacitors. There's $34 million worth of spend, not many failures, and pretty good on-time delivery. And so let's jump into Tamr and look at how that category is performing. So what I'm looking at here is the global view of my spend with capacitors and how well this category is performing in supply chain and procurement, even in engineering. And I'm going to use this information to quickly identify where can I reduce the suppliers? Because again, the name of the game is how do we get the optimal mix of suppliers so we could drive down costs with just the strategic suppliers. And so by going to one category, I could see all of my suppliers within that category. I could see all of my spend. I could see all of the different parts, all of the different sites that are purchasing, as well as key performance metrics. I'm going to start by looking at how is my spend allocated. I have 14 suppliers for capacitors. Well, that's quite a few suppliers. And if I drill down, see, there are a number of suppliers where the spend is $66,000, $85,000, $96,000. This is all information that once surfaced in this way, in a clean, unified, central area, I could see, maybe I don't need all of these suppliers. Maybe there's an opportunity to give some of this volume to some of these other suppliers and have them provide us with lower costs in return. So again, it's taking data scattered throughout the enterprise about how many products is IPDIA on, for example. How many unique parts do they have? What's the on-time delivery? And within just a few clicks, I'm able to figure out, okay, IPDIA is a supplier of interest. I might not want to continue to do business with them because I could give that volume somewhere else. And I could drill into information about that supplier now in a very similar manner, where all of that data has been brought in together in one place. And now I can see that here are the 3 parts that I'm purchasing from IPDIA. There are 3 alternate sources of this part, 5 of this part, and 4 of this part. I think I'm going to go on ahead and switch the volume to use those alternate sources. These are all workflows that typically take a commodity manager or a procurement professional hours, if not days, to develop. With Tamr, you're able to get this information right away, cut down those cycle times on finding these opportunities because, again, there's so much opportunity that's just hidden away in the data because someone, in this case, could have developed the relationship with IPDIA years ago and forgot that this was still going on. And unless you have all this data nice and centralized, it's hard to find those opportunities. And so what Tamr has done here is really brought in all of that information. So as a commodity manager, you're able to see everything you need to make that decision. And so how did Tamr do that? Well, within Tamr, it starts with what we call the sources page. And this is where all of the information is loaded into Tamr. And so this is where all of those data sources globally are connected to Tamr and brought in so that they could be used for analytics and used to find insight. So this process is a simple process of just connecting your systems. So things like ERP, product lifecycle management, files, spreadsheets in particular are what we see a lot of. And then finally, market intelligence information. So those third-party data sources that contain nearly endless information, but that you really need to look at in proper context in order to identify if that information is valuable. You're able to bring that into Tamr right here as well and merge that with your existing data sources. After that information has been brought into Tamr, Tamr is able to use machine learning in order to automatically clean up and classify most of that information. And for the areas where Tamr has low confidence in its categorization or in how it's cleaning up the data, it'll ask the user a simple question where they just check yes or no. And by answering that question, they're training Tamr on how they want their information prepared. So for each unique company, Tamr has a unique set of rules and a unique amount of information that it learns automatically. And so rather than having hard-coded rules, Tamr is learning these things from the environment in which it's deployed. It's looking at things like this free text description, Hollyland glass tube fuse, looking at the supplier name, what else is this supplier providing, and things like the general ledger account description. It's using all of this context in order to define a category. And then once someone in the business says this is right or this is wrong, Tamr is going to learn from that and effectively develop dynamic rules that are unique to that company and unique to how that company wants their information prepared and classified so that they're able to get the analytics they need. And then what the output of that looks like is those scorecards that I had shown, as well as a prepared set of data that can be exported into a tool like Tableau for the types of analytics that I showed before. And so the second use case beyond just decreasing suppliers is this use case and this idea of how can I track all of the information that's going on in the market and all of the information that's happening in my supply chain so that as it happens, I'm reacting and I'm taking action so that the problem doesn't get much bigger. One of the areas is with commodity prices. Here's an alert that the cost of transformers is 20% higher than market index. Now what that means is there has been a market index set against the transformer. So for example, the price of copper in this case, and we are tracking the price that this customer is paying for transformers versus the cost of copper. And so if on day one, transformers cost $1 and copper costs, let's say, $1, and then on day 10, copper drops to 80 cents, but transformers still cost $1, then there should be a cost reduction there. And that's what this is flagging. This is saying the underlying cost of this item has dropped. You should know about it because there's an opportunity. And so by clicking on that, I could go into the scorecard. I can quickly look at all of the different parts, all of the different suppliers, and I could use this third-party information about the current price index to say, okay, there's some opportunity here. Who should I go negotiate with? Well, I'll take a look at all my suppliers. Well, I have $22 million worth of spend with this supplier, 18 with this supplier. I'm going to focus my efforts there and go have the negotiation. So in walking through this demo, we were able to show that Tamr can be used to very quickly bring all this information together, get that context, and uncover brand new value that it would be very difficult to uncover otherwise. that's the end of the demo. Would love to take questions and get any thoughts from anyone on the webinar.
Oh, Matt, so we do have some questions for you. I just want to remind the audience that if they do have a question for Matt, just open up your group chat widget, put a capital Q in front of the question so we know it's for him. We can make sure that he sees it for Q&A. But I'll start with, I'm a data scientist. What analytics project should the procurement team start with?
Yeah, I think the project that we kind of walked through in the demo with going through and seeing how many suppliers you have for each category is something that can be extremely powerful. I think on the surface it feels it could feel simple, but when you actually start looking at the data and try doing this, you realize that if you're someone within procurement, it takes a lot of help and support from a data scientist or from your IT team in order to get this information in a way that's very actionable. And so I think that's an area where the amount of savings are quite significant. And it's a challenging problem because there's just so much information about how you're spending with suppliers, and supplier names come in so many different formats that you really need an automated approach in order to be able to do it effectively. The upside is the savings are going to be worth the effort.
Let's see. Is there a threshold on the size of the company you work with?
So we've worked with companies kind of spanning the gamut from pretty small companies to some of the largest companies in the world. And I would say that probably less important is the size of the company, and much more important is the variety of the data and what you're trying to do with it. There are a lot of companies now that run very lean enterprises and use data as the primary driver of decision making and the primary way that they're able to differentiate. And those types of companies we love working with. And so in terms of the size, I would say it's really about the size and the variety of the data that really matters, because that's often what creates the most manual effort and where we have the biggest impact.
How is the data prepared? Excuse me. How is the data prepared before integration?
Yeah. So the data will be loaded into Tamr, and then Tamr will use machine learning algorithms in order to clean up and prepare that data, and then users will be asked yes/no questions about the data in order to finish the preparation and also train Tamr. And once that's done, then the data is ready to be imported into whatever tool is needed. So whether that's a business intelligence environment like Tableau or ClickView, or a data warehouse, the real kind of data preparation pieces all happen either out of sight of the user and just happen automatically, or they happen through that training exercise of answering yes/no questions. But after that's done, then the data will be in a prepared state, and new data will be automatically prepared, and then it'll be either exported or connected to whatever data infrastructure is currently in place and where analysts and data scientists are pulling data from today.
We have a question about how is the data being refreshed?
Yeah. So in the instances where Tamr is connecting directly to, say, an ERP, then we would be able to fit Tamr in so that that data just flows through Tamr before it goes to its endpoint. There are other instances where Tamr is deployed in more of a batch process where the information, the customer will send that information, just upload that on a regular interval, either weekly or monthly, and then it'll be automatically just run through Tamr. And so you can upload it to a portal and have it cleaned that way. Or if you just want to connect it directly into your technology infrastructure, we're able to do that and then just output it into the tools that you need.
Another question, how is Tamr different from, say, Tableau?
Yeah, it's a great question. Tamr is a partner of Tableau's, and we are very complementary to Tableau. Tableau is on the visualization side in just the aspect of taking data and allowing you to manipulate it and run reports. Tamr is kind of a step before Tableau, where it's actually cleaning up that data and getting that data ready for an accurate report. And so, examples of how Tamr works well with Tableau, one example is if you have supplier names or customer names where there are a lot of duplicates, Tamr would clean that up before putting that into Tableau. Or if the data isn't correctly categorized. For example, you might have something categorized as travel spend when it's actually office supplies. That information would all be cleaned up in Tamr. So essentially, what Tamr is doing is ensuring whatever you put into Tableau is accurate and is actionable. And so Tamr works and kind of does the mile right before you put it into a reporting tool. So there are some of the built-in reports that I showed, like those scorecards, but for analytics and running things in Tableau, you really need a tool like Tamr to ensure data quality. Or if you want to integrate multiple data sources. So let's say you have information about supplier financials and you have a list of all of your suppliers. Those names likely don't match, and it's very hard to just do a simple match to get all of that information to tie together. Tamr is used in instances like that so that you could just take those two data sources and get to analytics, as opposed to manually combining those data sources and figuring out, for example, which of my suppliers aren't profitable or which of my customers are risky and have known compliance issues.
Can you provide traceability to where the data point came from?
Yeah. So within Tamr, we'll be able to show what the source of data is that's populating that piece of information. And so, as an example, within a scorecard view, for example, you could see for each of the metrics what's the source of that data. Or if you're just looking at supplier spend and you want to go through the list of transactions, you could see for each transaction and each piece of information what was the source of that information. And so when you're cleaning up this data or you're looking at your clean data, you could see where that information came from before it was put into Tamr.
What is a typical amount of time to integrate data with Tamr?
Not very long. So the good news about Tamr, and one of the things that I'm most excited about with Tamr is that once you provide a sample data set, for example, that could be run into Tamr in a matter of hours or days, and then actually getting Tamr fully up and running within even the most complex environments is a matter of days or weeks. And so integrating data with Tamr is an area where we take a lot of pride and try to really show value, because as people in the working in the business who want to make value out of this data, they just want this information connected as quickly as possible. And Tamr is designed to connect to those data sources very quickly. And by working with the types of customers we've worked with, the very large enterprises, we've seen such a vast diversity of data that connecting it to Tamr is something that happens very, very quickly.
Can smaller companies find savings using Tamr as well?
Yeah. I think one of the things that really strikes me a lot with small companies, so there are some small companies who they've maybe gone through the exercise of manually cleaning up the data. But one of the things that strikes me as a big opportunity is, what about data outside of ERP? And so some of our customers who are smaller, they say, the data that's in my ERP is clean and categorized. Where else are there opportunities? And in those cases, looking at things like spreadsheets coming from suppliers, looking at things like market data about how commodity prices are changing, how supplier financials are changing. That's how small companies are able to really act and operate like companies with a lot more leverage, is by just having more information about their suppliers, more information about their categories, about the commodities that they care about. And so with small companies, there's typically some savings that can be gained by just cleaning up the data and running basic spend analysis, spend by category, spend by supplier. But a lot of the opportunity, is buried in all of these spreadsheets about historical prices, about supplier performance, and information that's on the web about financials, about commodity prices. And so I think, absolutely, small companies can save a lot of money with data, and we've seen some really interesting ways that companies are using data to take extremely small procurement teams and have them get a lot done.
Does Tamr provide tools for cleaning up data / removing inconsistent data before preparing it?
Yeah. So Tamr, one of the core features of Tamr is actually cleaning up that data and removing some of those inconsistent pieces of data. So whether it's duplicate suppliers, duplicate customers, duplicate records, Tamr has built in tools in order to do that. And so the Tamr can be thought of kind of in two phases. One, cleaning up all of the data that goes into Tamr, so ensuring that every supplier, for example, G period, E period reads the same as GE. All of that happens automatically, and then the second piece that happens is being able to integrate those different data sources, so data coming from multiple areas. So cleaning up data is absolutely part of that process, and absolutely needed if you're going to actually merge multiple information sources.
How can we use Tamr analytics for sourcing application development / maintenance suppliers?
Yeah, good question. So I'm trying to ensure that I understand it correctly. Sourcing application development / maintenance. Yeah. So I think if I understand the question correctly, the question is around using Tamr analytics for certain categories of suppliers within the maintenance and application development space. And so one of the things that I think is really valuable and impactful about Tamr is that it can read so many different types of data and is very flexible in the type of data that can be imported. And so since it's reading those free text descriptions and it's learning from the business user, then regardless of what categories you're looking to manage, Tamr is able to learn from the information you give it and act very kind of independently, if you will, in your environment. And so for each category of spend or whatever you're trying to accomplish within sourcing, Tamr is able to recognize that data because it relies on machine learning, and it's learning from all of that contextual information. And then you're able to take all of that clean and prepared data, and you're able to build applications around it, whether it's the supplier scorecards that are built into Tamr, or if you want to build, like mentioned at one of our customers, the Google search style mobile application. The data is there for you to do that, and that's the real benefit of Tamr.
Another question, is this a consulting solution or a software as a service?
So Tamr is typically deployed as a software license with some services involved, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you said, I have the analytics resources that I need, I just need the software to clean up the data and to help me run these analytics and get to these insights faster, we're able to support that. If you said, I don't have the analytics needed and I really need help mining through all of this data, figuring out where there are opportunities, and delivering these analytics, we can help with that as well. We're engaged with customers kind of doing a little bit of both depending on the customer's needs. And so our primary objective within procurement is to help you save money and get ROI, whether that's through analytics that we provide for you and through a more consultative approach, or if it's through just pure software, we're able to do both. The software will be used regardless because it is such a significant lever for driving those savings. But it's really about what's going to make you successful in your environment to get those savings.
Robert asks, is it reasonable to expect a normal business user to maintain Tamr, or will it require a specialized human resource to write, report, and load the data?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the great thing about Tamr is that one, by using machine learning, it is learning from the input of the business user. So after the data has been properly cleaned up and Tamr has been effectively trained, it'll automatically clean up that data going forward. And so the business user won't need to interact very much with Tamr because it's become an automatic process. But training Tamr is a simple yes-no question. And so what Tamr was really designed for is the business user, not for a specialized human resource. Because what Tamr is looking to do is it's looking to take that intelligence that's in the business and that those business subject matter experts have, and it's looking to easily and quickly extract that just through simple yes-no questions. And so if you're someone who understands the data well and understands the business well, then you can use Tamr extremely effectively. No special human resource needed.
I think we have time for one last question. Where is Tamr deployed/hosted? On the client's infrastructure, or is it external cloud hosted? Where is the data stored?
Yeah, so where is Tamr deployed on the client's infrastructure or cloud hosted? We've had deployments in both instances. In some instances, our customers need it deployed on premise, and we are able to go on site, deploy it, and support that. But we also have a cloud-based offering for Tamr, so that if you're a customer who would rather just connect your data in the cloud and have us access that remotely, we can do that as well. And then the data is stored, it'll be stored within your kind of existing technology infrastructure, because as mentioned, Tamr is really flowing that data through and into the tools that you need to drive results. And so Tamr operates as that layer that's cleaning it up and giving that data right back to you, so then you can put it in the environment and continue with your existing business processes, because business processes take a long time to develop, and we want to make sure that the product is built to operate within those existing processes.
Well, that looks about all the time we have today, Matt. But is there anything else you want to let the audience know before we sign off for the day?
Just that I hope throughout this presentation the amount of opportunity for cost savings was clear, because I think a lot of companies would really benefit by taking a closer look at their spend and trying to use data in new ways to drive down costs. I think we're in a very interesting time in the world where driving revenue growth is very difficult. But as folks within companies, we all need to increase the profitability of our company and increase the profitability of investments we've made. And so I think procurement is one of those areas where it's super high impact, but doesn't always get the amount of attention that it deserves. And so I would just say that folks should really think about, are there opportunities within my procurement? Can I look for ways to change how I manage my spend in order to get those savings, because those savings go straight to the bottom line.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today and for presenting such an outstanding and informative webcast and sharing your knowledge and expertise with our audience.
Thank you, Katie, for having me. Really enjoyed it.
We'd like to thank all of you that attended our webcast today and hope you benefited from it. As we close out, we'd like to once again thank Tamr and let you know that Tamr blends automation and data science expertise to speed and simplify data preparation for analytics so businesses can ask big questions and get business insights faster. Thanks again for joining us. This will conclude our webcast today. Goodbye, everyone.